It's so great to be here with Women in Film. Hi, Lisa. How are you?
Hello.
Thanks for joining. Olin is incredible and powerful and frustrating as well. But so important to have been made, and I'm looking forward to talking to you about it. And wanted to start with just the first, most obvious, most important question: Why? Why did you feel compelled to make this movie?
Thank you, Kat, and thank you, Women in Film, for this opportunity to conversate today. Um, you know, as a filmmaker, I am always looking for projects that allow me to engage as an artist and an activist, and All In presented that perfect kismet opportunity. The origin and of this story is two words, one fabulous person, and that's Stacy Abrams. And after the 2018 election, a lot of people came to Stacy and they wanted to tell that story. And she actually wisely realized that it wasn't about that story, but it was the history behind this long history of voter suppression in our country and kind of the collateral effect that we saw happen in Georgia. And so she met with several filmmakers, decided on the team at Story Syndicate. I met with her also. I was really nervous. What you see with Stacy is what you get. She is brilliant. She is kind. She is a great leader and teacher. And, in the first 5 minutes of meeting, we spoke about the architecture of voter suppression. We talked about history. We talked about using media to present factual information. And I knew that even though we were going to be an incredibly tight schedule to tell this history, it was something that, I had to be a part of.
And I'd love to talk about the information you chose. I work and live in voting rights. It's all I talk about all day, every day. And, whenever people ask me, well, what's the history of voter suppression and what's happening now? I could go on for weeks, unfortunately. And you had to choose what to focus on and how to narrow down that story. And I know that that's a challenge in this subject. And really, anytime you're making a documentary, is that you could tell a 10-hour story and you've got to narrow it down. How did you decide what to focus on and how to craft this story to tell this one particular narrative?
Well, it's interesting, Kat, when you said like you could go on for weeks talking about this story. That's the blessing and the curse, in that it is evergreen. We're seeing new manifestations of voter suppression. It seemed to feel like it was daily. Now it feels like it's hourly as voting has begun. But if anything, that actually helps you because you know that it is in its infinity, there are certain milestone moments. So obviously, we started with the beginning of the country, the preamble to the Constitution, we the people. And who are those people? They are not women, they are not indigenous people, they are not poor people. They are 6% of, Americans, white men. And then, to fast forward, what's the next seminal moment? I think it's always this push and pull. So then the push forward is like the promise of the 15th Amendment, and granting the franchise to African American men, and what happens with Reconstruction, with Black senators and governors, and tremendous growth that happens in our country. But then the pushback, the violence, the intimidation, the poll taxes, the literacy taxes. But then we move forward, and we have in 1965 the Voting Rights Act, which is such a major accomplishment. And truly the franchise is then begins to open up, because it's not immediate. There's still a lot of work to be done. You know, the pushback in 2013 with the Shelby County v. Holder decision, which, for those who don't know, you know, there's 9 states that had to have pre-clearance if they were going to change any of the voting laws. And this pre-clearance provision goes out the door. And immediately we see these very strict voter ID laws, you know, everything this starts to happen that brings us to this moment. And, you know, I think oftentimes, you know, so many of us are saying, how did we get to this moment? Well, we got to this moment because, you know, the past is truly prologue to framing not only the conversations, but an agenda that has existed from the beginning. And it's an agenda tied to power.
Yeah, absolutely. That's such a great way to put it. So I know whenever I speak about voting, I always say one thing, frequently the 6% number or something, and it just floors people. It's like they had no idea. As you were making this documentary and researching and learning about voting rights and voter suppression in America, what was the thing that really surprised you the most?
You know, I thought I knew. You know, I'm very lucky to come from a family of activists, of people who were very involved, and not only in this country, but also in Latin America, where my father's from. Um, I think there's always 2 things that I think about that really surprised me. One was, as I just alluded to earlier, in 2013, the Shelby County v. Holder Supreme Court decision. What was amazing is that literally hours after the decision, these strict rules start, you know, these rules that are so strict, they start rolling out. And I know that's something that, you know, with your work, you have done a lot to help in terms of voter ID laws, because you know, in Texas, you can vote with your gun license, you can't vote with your student ID. And so the swift efficiency um, and targeted suppression that happens so quickly after that ruling is always something that I find boggling, but not, because we know that these seeds have been planted for a long time. There's nothing arbitrary about it. The other thing that is always interesting, that was a great discovery for both Liz and I in making this film, was those moments with both Stacy Abrams and with Brian Kemp when they go to vote and they have problems, right?
Yeah, it was a frustrating moment in 2018 when it happened to Stacy, and then when it happened to Brian, it was a little bit of a like, haha, you know, like, it's like small moment in the chaos of like, even you. I'm so, but you know, we're now in the middle of election season, and we're seeing, and have for several weeks now, a lot of the same problems that we saw in 2018 in Georgia, a lot of the same problems that we've seen over and over again. What is your take on what we're seeing on the ground during voting right now? And what advice do you have for people who still haven't voted and maybe are in Georgia or Texas and are looking at those long lines, or are worried about whether or not their ballots will be counted?
Well, you know, we're seeing the long lines again. We're seeing polling locations that have been closed, and the nearest one is much more difficult for people to get to in certain communities. What we've seen in Texas with the limitations with drop-off ballots. All right, so yes, so I think it's good because we've pulled the veil back. We know it's happening, and it underscores how important our vote is. Because if it wasn't so important, why is all this trickery going on to take it away? We know that what numbers we can call, if we have any difficulties. And what heartens me is that people are voting early. People are digging their heels in and not leaving until they're allowed to vote. Oftentimes in the past, individuals would think it was their fault when they got there and someone said, "Oh, your name is, you've been purged, your name isn't on the list." People are saying, "Well, I want a provisional ballot. And what do I need to do to cure it?" The level of conversation about voter suppression and what people can do to protect their vote, I believe, has not only spurred many people to vote early, but if they run into problems, to not just take the onus on themselves and walk away without voting, but to actually take constructive action to vote.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. I want to switch over a little bit to the filmmaking side, because you only had a year to make this documentary, and then it turned out to be this year of all years. And then you were making a documentary during many apocalypses. What was it like having to make, and I believe you were doing mostly post, during COVID while you were quarantined? What did that look like?
A blessing and a curse. We knew when we started last fall that we had very specific dates to deliver this film, for it to be out and to contribute to the factual information that I think people were looking for. And so that's the blessing of two directors, is the ability to divide and conquer. We had two editors, and luckily we finished our final interviews the first week of March, immediately after the office closed, but we were able to pivot to working remotely. And our team literally is all over the world. One editor was in Lisbon, our illustrator is based in Berlin, the animator in Poland, the other editor in New York, people in Atlanta. We had at the company incredible, head of post production, and Brian really just kind of went to the lab and found amazing ways for us to connect, to share the different cuts, and there was nothing else to do but work. During those early months, everyone was so concerned, and there was very little information about the pandemic, and so that everyone just stayed inside. So we were literally, we would meet every morning at 10, and then we would kind of be sending cuts back and forth all day and into the early evening. And if anything, seeing what was happening in the country, and then I think further fuel with the killing of George Floyd, added even more urgency, to telling the story and getting it out with all, in a timely fashion.
Absolutely. And this is certainly not the first time in your career that you have made a film that has a social message that, aims for social impact. What advice do you have for filmmakers that are looking to use their craft for social impact? How do you, advise that they even go about starting that?
Well, with All In, when we started the film and in our conversations with Stacy, who's also a producer on the film, we knew that we wanted to have a dynamic social impact campaign. We have a website, All In for Voting, which has a broad range of resources with everything from how to check your registration to becoming a poll worker. There's a Grow a Voter curriculum that you can download. And we also worked with our partners at Amazon Studios for a bus tour that had pop-up screenings and also registered people. It's more than a movie. It's a movement. It's about engagement, and it's about meeting people where they are. And so I think as when people start films, and it begins when you start the film. I always think about, like, who's my audience and how do I want to meet them, and what are the tools that I think you can take away from this film that we can package and share in a manner that everyone has access to. And so it was always like, yes, here's what's going on with the film. But in our conversations with all of our partners, we started planning what this campaign would look like. And, we've done grants with, given grants to visual artists, and have given grants to organizations with boots on the ground who are doing incredible work. We created partnerships with everyone from the Southern Poverty Law Center to Voto Latinos. All of this takes time, and it was done with led by our partners at the Raven Group, and also our social impact manager, Ben O'Keefe. They saw the film, they had an idea of important historical beats that we were exploring. They found the right partners to complement. We all kind of just continued to make certain that anyone who sees this film and wanted to know more history or learn about resources or become engaged, that we would have outreach that would allow that access.
That's incredible. And I mean, I know, Spread the Vote, we had some volunteers at your events, and we have sent all in swag all over the country to people doing comfort at the polls. So I am a direct recipient of how great your grassroots campaign has been. You guys have done an incredible job. I think in a lot of ways, more sort of thoughtful I'm about really making an impact than I've seen sort of on the nonprofit side from a lot of other projects. And I've really appreciated that. And I think this may be connected to my very, very favorite thing about this movie, which is that both of the co-directors are women, which I love. Most of the producers are women. It's centered around women. You have a lot of women experts in the documentary. It's this industry that is still a very rare thing, unfortunately. But this is, of course, women in film. Do you have any advice specifically for women who are looking to get started as directors or producers, and who are particularly looking to make, movies and documentaries that really mean something? In a world where that can be more challenging in 2020 than ever, but it can be tough.
Well, I think the first thing is that your how you show up and what you create is your calling card. A big part of how I came to this project is I worked with Dan Cogan of Story Syndicate on the Apollo Theater documentary that I produced. And Dan is Liz Garbus's partner in life and in Story Syndicate. And that was how I got to know Liz better. And so I think that, your work, it oftentimes shows up before you do, to people and to places that you don't even know. And then the next part of it is community. The only way that we were able to make this film is relationships in so many places, on the technical side, on the artistry side, on who we interviewed. You're leveraging relationships, saying, can you get me access to this person? Can you get me into this building to shoot? And so community, and let your work and your work ethic be strong. I think they all are part of what becomes your living resume.
I love that. Your work shows up before you do. I might just put that on a banner on my wall.
You're doing it, but you're doing it. You don't need a banner.
So what's next? What's your next project or thing that you're doing? Maybe you're going on a long vacation, which you deserve.
Oh, I love you. Thank you for wishing that for me. Well, first of all, can't stop, won't stop until all the ballots are counted, till we start seeing the change that we want, to truly realize that bright shining city on the hill that we all should have access to. And then I am directing another documentary. It is based on an incredible historical institution. That's all I could say. It's funny when you have to dance around. It's like, okay, I can't. I'm dying to share, and it's really exciting. This new project. Yeah.
I love asking that question because it's like, oh, there's just going to be some like clues and hints and like little red herrings I'm going to have to guess. Well, I can't wait to see it. But I wanted to ask, what is your dream of voting or for voting in America? So, I always tell this story about India, where there is a monk. He lives on the top of a mountain. It's a 4-day, 300-mile hike. And every election, a group of poll workers strap a polling booth to their backs, and they take this 4-day hike to the top of a mountain. And they set up a polling booth so that this one monk can vote. And then they pick up the booth and they hike back to town, because that is a country that deeply cares about making sure that every single citizen can vote. It is the opposite of America in every way. And my dream is that we get to a place where we care so much about voting that we would be willing to send a team of poll workers to climb a mountain to make sure that one man can vote. What is your dream for voting in America?
I think around right now, 55% of Americans vote. And, when I was listening to President Obama in Philadelphia, last week, it really struck me what he said, and it's my dream to imagine what the change that would happen, the representation we would have if 60% voted, if 70%, if 80%, like the greater engagement leads to greater change. Like, one election is not a panacea for everything, but when we look at the issues that we are combating, from climate change to education, healthcare, that's just kind of the tip of the iceberg. We need to have representation that is reflective of our communities and is going to advocate and protect us and represent us. That's the great exchange in a democracy with the people that we elect. The demo in democracy is the people, and I want the people to show up.
That's amazing. I think that's a perfect place to wrap. I can't thank you enough for making this movie. As someone whose whole life is voting rights, and I'm constantly sort of shouting from the rooftops and hoping people listen, and then you make a movie and it's on Amazon, and it's like, oh great, I can just sit down and retire now. Everybody knows.
No retirement for you, Kat. Your work is incredible. It is powerful. It is necessary. Can't stop, won't stop is your mantra too.
Absolutely, it absolutely is. Can you tell everybody where they find this great movie that hopefully they've seen and will watch again, and what again is your website where they can find more information about this incredible campaign?
So you can find the film on Amazon Prime, and there's actually there's a voting hub on Amazon with more information, and of course at our site allinforvoting.com. The curriculum, for Grow a Voter with civics lessons for high school and college students. Are there information on how to host a watch party and a discussion guide? All live on allinforvoting.com.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Lisa.
Thank you.